almost done with the PhD students were offered this kind of opportunity. So I think you should take advantage of this. I'm starting also to understand that I need to fight the enemy that is Apple, because now you can see if people are copying and pasting text. I mean, even professors, we are in a hurry sometimes, we need to copy and paste some text. But of course, every document, every email that you send out is a document that is going to stay in your record. So you have to be very careful of what you're writing to people. You have to be always very careful of what you're doing there. Another comment that I would like to make is that perhaps is a tiny little component. There were already interesting topics discussed in this conversation. I was lucky to be involved in, I went for 3 or 4 interviews, I don't remember exactly what is the number, and I discussed my activities with different professors. During a conversation with many professors, you're going to have typically a conversation of 30 minutes with each individual of the department sometimes. I remember in one place I met 50 people in 3 days. It was a really long interview for me. One thing that I remember though is that one of the professors told me that he wasn't really happy about the previous candidate because he was text messaging in front of him. Now, since you are part of the new generation and you cannot stay far away from yourself, keep in mind that you are going to deal with people that are part of a different generation, like me, because I'm not a big fan of that.
And even me, I'm just a couple years out and I hate that.
So in the moment in which you are a person that is giving 30 minutes of his life, a professor, that is there to listen to what you have to tell to him, and you take that time to text message someone else in front of him or her, I guarantee you that even if you got a great seminar, you leave a really bad impression. So sometimes these little tiny things can make a difference in the process. Of course, luckily today you're going to be exposed to really important matters. I guarantee you that a lot of people don't get turned off by this, but I wanted just to give you a little tiny example of what could ruin your experience if you want. Okay? And again, I like to move on to the next speaker because I already took too much time. Okay, next speaker, and I apologize for the pronunciation, Hande Benson. All right. So Hande is associate professor at the Decision Sciences Department in the Lebo College of Business of Drexel University. You got an office in the beautiful new building?
Not yet.
Not yet, but
not yet. We're moving in December.
Can I get a little office too?
That's the thing. They're all very little offices, so you may not want them.
One day I will be at the last floor. Sorry about the intrusion. She graduated from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., of course, in mathematics and computer science, magna cum laude, congratulations, in 1997. Then she did her master and her PhD in operations, research, and financial engineering at Princeton University. And she completed her PhD in 2001. Now, her current research interests are in the field of nonlinear programming, particularly in using interior point methods to solve large-scale optimization problems. And this is a very interesting field because it regards, even if you're from a business world, it regards pretty much every day the engineering world. I'm really interested in your talk because business is what I've been trying to avoid for my entire life, but for the engineers in the room, you're not going to escape it. Forget about that. Unfortunately, you're going to deal with that. Even if you become a faculty or become the head of a department, you're going to fight with that on a daily basis. Okay? It's not going to make you sleep. So,
Thank you. Thank you. And let me start by saying, you have sort of two female faculty members kind of back to back. And I'm in a business school. I did not negotiate. I took that contract and I said, thank you for everything you've given me. I'm signing on the dotted line and sending it back. It's a bad thing to do. It's a bad thing to do. I thankfully, when I arrived at Drexel, a few years down the road, I had a very good department chair who decided that I was due for a market adjustment. And finally, I started making the same thing that my male colleague who started with me, the same amount that my male colleague who started with me was actually making from the first year. So keep that in mind. They expect you to negotiate. So I have kind of a dual role here. One, I'm a faculty member in business, so I can give you the perspective from somebody who advises dissertations, who's been through kind of living vicariously through my student the PhD process in a business school, and also now in my current role as PhD coordinator for my department. But my personal experience is actually coming up through an engineering school. Princeton does not have professional schools, so I got my degree in an engineering school. A lot of my work being in OR is really at the intersection of actually business, math, and engineering. I've co-advised electrical engineering students before, so my personal experience very much differs from what I'm about to show you, but I'm kind of unique in the business school for that reason. So I kind of want to show you the typical picture more than really my own picture. The reason why we kind of are starting with the business disciplines is that there are several tracks of disciplines in business that work very differently. And so let me just kind of give you an idea. And by the way, being from a business school, everything's branded. So you have to kind of get used to, if you go to a conference, all your slides, templates are already given to you. There's little logos here and there. Everybody knows what color you're supposed to present. Big thing over there. So we have different types of graduate programs at the business school, MS programs. We have 2 PhD tracks, and at Drexel we don't have doctorate in business administration and executive doctorate, but it could be coming down the pike, it's being considered, etc. So just to kind of give you, for those of you who may be used to kind of like the engineering, the sciences, etc., the master's and the PhD are basically completely separate processes. The master's degrees tend to be terminal in nature. They're not really there to prepare you for a PhD. You don't enter into a master's program and then go on to be a PhD student. They are there for MS in accounting, for example. They prepare you to be a CPA. For MS in finance, that's like the one where people tend to go on to PhD studies after that, but it's really for people that come from engineering, etc., to get a business education that's not broad-based like an MBA. They want to go work in the finance field, they have an engineering background, they have a science background, and they want to learn finance, and they want to learn it well and deeply. An MBA is kind of like the broad-based education here. We have degrees in business analytics, economics. These are fairly typical of business schools as far as MS degrees go. Some schools have like real estate management and things of that nature as well. They tend to have part-time and full-time options to accommodate people who are going to be attending in the evenings and working at the same time. A lot of our students at the master's level tend to also work. But we also have full-time options to accommodate international students as well. The PhD side of the story is that we have 2 tracks, and most schools have 2 tracks. We call them behavioral and economics here at Drexel. They really would be behavioral and quantitative if I had my way, rather than calling it economics. The behavioral folks then say, well, we deal with numbers too, and that's quantitative. Anyway, that's an argument for a different day. So the behavioral side tends to be the accounting, the management, kind of your organizational behavior and strategy people, marketing. The economics for the quant side tends to be economics, finance, operations management, and I'll throw management science and operations research in there. That's the case at Drexel. A lot of universities will have an industrial engineering department where a lot of these folks are actually housed. So my discipline tends to be in engineering, in math, in the business school, maybe in a few of those places at the same time, depending on what school you're actually in. Crossovers occur. We have quant students out of accounting. We have behavioral students out of operations management. So crossovers tend to be allowed as well, and PhD programs are full-time. The doctorate in business administration, executive doctorate are really kind of more the professional side of a PhD degree. But those tend to be, just to kind of set the framework for what I'm going to discuss. Now, the real story here that might be the same or different from what you experienced. We have a very different funding model for our programs. The master's programs, because they're not really going to lead to a PhD, you either have to pay yourself, you have to get some sort of scholarship, or your company pays for you, whatever. A master's program is not something that's funded for you to do research. PhD programs, they are, the ones we offer here include full funding, so stipend, tuition, etc., some travel support. All of this comes from, I say dean's office, but it's kind of distributed out of the dean's office. It really comes from the provost. And so we're not talking about faculty members who have external funding and therefore established labs or anything like that. Your boss is in the dean's office. And so that brings with it some great things in that as faculty we don't have to worry about, are we going to be able to support the student for 4 or 5 years? It allows for kind of continuity, lack of risk in that respect. Unfortunately, it also means that they probably don't get paid as well as some other places because it's a really big chunk of funding. And it means things like you have one pool of money for travel funds that the dean's office assigns you, and that's essentially it. Now, of course, we're trying to go to, for kind of the faculty culture, industry-sponsored and funding agency and foundation-sponsored projects, so that the goal is at least to supplement, if not to kind of pay for some of these other expenses, dean's office is now taking on. But that also kind of brings with it an independence from an advisor. There's no urgency really right when you get there to find somebody who will pay your bills, essentially, and sponsor your research. You're really in charge of, reading, finding topics, shopping around, and you have a year or two, et cetera, that you can do this in. Post-doc positions are rare. If you're in OR or something like that, sure, you can do post-doc, but it's very, very rare that a business school actually have post-doc positions. Most of the faculty in business schools, junior faculty, will come straight out of graduate school or for junior faculty positions at other universities. So as far as fundamental skills go, depends on the department, depends on the track. So you would be expected to have kind of a business or a social sciences background, generally for the behavioral track. On the econ track and quant track, we like engineers, we like mathematicians, we like computer scientists to apply. So my background was math and computer science, and I thought about kind of putting those together and then going on to mathematical programming. So that's, the econ folks love math majors, they love kind of quantitative econ majors. Finance is the same way. So it kind of varies by department what you're looking for. As far as the mathematical background, for behavioral, for example, it's really statistics. They want you to know statistics. For economics, calculus and above. The more math you know, the better it is. Which then means, for those of you who may be thinking, for those of you that are kind of thinking of the quantitative fields, we don't want you to have any work experience because we don't want you forgetting your math. We want you to go straight through and finish out your PhD. But for the behavioral track, it's a good idea for like marketing PhDs, for example, to have been out there and think about some projects that they could be doing. Some work experience is good. And primarily what we're looking at really are kind of that background, the transcripts, and then the GMAT or GRE scores when you think about students coming in. Those are the skills that are required to get in. These are the things we want you to know in your first year or two. This is too much detail, we don't need to go through it, but we're basically teaching you how to conduct research once you get there. That's too small. Can't really read that. But kind of the beyond the core process is pretty much the same once you're done with the core courses, because remember, the dean's office is paying for everybody, so everybody's a business administration PhD student when they start. You don't really go into the disciplines until after that. So you start with kind of taking a few discipline courses. You have your first year core exam and maybe a few departmental exams. You take some more courses in your discipline in your second year, and then you take your candidacy exam, and then it's your dissertation research. So that's, I think, pretty typical in a lot of areas. Expectations, publish, publish, publish. So the thing about a business school is that it runs on tuition dollars. Tuition dollars come to you if you are ranked high. Ranking agencies rank you high if your faculty have top-tier publications. And so the publication outlets, so we could be thinking about in business, it could be anywhere from a refereed research journal out to Harvard Business Review. So there are kind of a wide range of publications that can be coming out here. But basically, if we want to be ranked, we want to hire somebody who already has publications that will be useful for our ranking. So that means that we should be preparing our students to go into the market with the same expectations. So just so you know, if you're thinking about kind of what are the expectations of me in terms of what I should produce in my field, it's not just kind of talking to your advisor and asking what their expectations are. Those expectations should be set at least by them looking at what are Drexel's, what is Drexel looking for when they're hiring junior faculty? Because presumably you're aiming at least Drexel to get hired, right? So you shouldn't be aiming lower than that. You should be aiming at the same level. We're at the top anyway, so there's no need to go any above that. But so a good indication is what your department wants out of its junior faculty candidates. And so for us, we want people who have published in the journals that count toward ranking. So we have this very formalized list of top-tier journals. So Financial Times, Business Week, etc. looks at these things too. So we want you to publish, publish, publish. So there's a second-year paper, and then additional papers to support your dissertation. We aim our students for at least 3 papers in refereed journals, with the goal of at least one of those being in one of the top-tier journals on that list. It doesn't have to be published at the time they graduate. We also tend to have very long review times in many of our disciplines. I have a paper that I did on my sabbatical, which was 2.5 years ago, that's still in the 3rd round review. And it's a computational paper. I threw out the computer that I did the test on. I mean, it's so we have very, very long lead times when it comes to publication. So we're not expecting our students to have published already, but maybe in 2nd round review, 3rd round review, maybe accepted, and then it'll be like another 1.5 years by the time it's in print. So. It's a long pipeline. So conference presentations, if you've been invited to give a presentation, for example, that's good. We don't deal in conference papers. That's just not really a big thing in the business disciplines. A lot of our conferences will have papers associated with them, but it's the journals that count. So conference publications, they may add a page to your vita, but nobody's really going to look at them to kind of evaluate you as far as hiring goes. They may look at it and say, oh wow, that was invited and it was a very exclusive workshop or something like that, so they must be getting recognized in their field. There's really not much, I should say, value to the actual appearance of the paper in the proceedings. Our students tend to graduate in 4 to 5 years, regardless of whether they have arrived with a master's degree, because remember what I said, master's degrees are generally thought of as terminal, not really related to the research track. So from the beginning, we actually teach you how to do PhD research. There's no, I finished my 2 years and now I'm going to come and work on a dissertation. We don't do that at all. You start from the beginning. There's a difference in the number of credits that you're kind of required to have before graduation. So if you're coming in with just a bachelor's degree, you may end up having to do 5 years, whereas with a master's, maybe you'll have the required number of credits after 4 years or so. All right, so that's basically the end of that. I did want to say kind of something that I've seen, that I saw in Kara's slide, and that is collaborations. I think Prashant had that in kind of his instructions to me, but I completely forgot to put that in there. Collaborations are good. Collaborations are very good in business as well. But what do we mean by collaborations? That's a little bit of a different story. So for us, collaborations tend to be industry collaborations, corporate collaborations, projects that you get to work on. So you can be at the Fed for the summer, for example, if you're a student in finance. That's the kind of collaboration really we're generally talking about. So that's actually one. And then the other is you tend to do kind of interdisciplinary collaborations. We tend to get a lot of these requests of students, for example, in strategy, or just students in management that are doing things that are related to leadership or entrepreneurship. We tend to get a lot of requests, say, from like engineering, and people think we actually do business rather than research business. But that's okay. We provide consulting type of expertise to them as well, and somewhere in there could be generation of new knowledge, and that goes into a research paper or dissertation or something like that. But yes, so collaborations are encouraged. They're really kind of like the bread and butter here. This is where we get a lot of our applied ideas. But the disciplines themselves, because they're, when you think of accounting, you're already in a very kind of what we call functional area. It tends to be a little bit less there, whereas in my discipline, in statistics, etc., we're really more about methodology. So we tend to be more collaborative than others, because we kind of are the service researchers, if you will. Okay, so I think maybe that covers most of it. Do we have time for this? Well, I'll let you do the moderating.
Again, take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions. We're going to have time for questions also at the end, and I know that it's not easy sometimes to ask questions because you might be shy. I was never asking questions during this kind of event, so I understand why you might. But if you have, speak up. This is a good time to.
Since most of these individuals here are from more technical backgrounds, like engineers, I'm assuming, moving from a technical role into an administrative role at a company and then becoming more of an adjunct in something like a business school, is that something that happens often?
It does. So, as I was saying, our funds come from tuition dollars, which means we teach a lot of courses to a lot of people. And a big value here that we have at Drexel is how much we appreciate kind of experiential learning. So from that perspective, we put a lot of what we call kind of these clinical faculty, or essentially practice faculty in front of our students, especially for upper level courses. We have, I was just talking to somebody in management, we have a course in outsourcing, for example, where we have a clinical professor who works with a startup that has a product, and the students here, and there's a group of students in India, they basically do the outsourcing of the work that needs to be done. So you need somebody who's been out there, who has some work experience, maybe coming from a technology company, and now it's in their role to actually think about, well, how do I now mass produce this product and sell it, etc. We need those kinds of people in the classroom as well. Another area where we need them is a lot of faculty members who can contribute to the analytics curriculum. We have a lot of folks, engineers, who are coming to us from Google and Facebook, etc. They're saying, well, I can teach a 3-week module. I can teach a whole course online because I have the experience. I've actually done this stuff. Now, I use it in a business setting, then we kind of convey that to the students. But yeah, absolutely. Clinical professors are an absolute key in our faculty. Yeah.
I think so when you interview for a business faculty position, would it be more motivated by the cost of that particular research, or maybe as an engineer, the results per se of the research?
Our research is cheap. Our research is very cheap, except maybe for the management folks who need some sort of a behavioral lab and therefore actually, they need that room with the two-way mirrors and things like that, then you actually need a facility. But for the rest of us, we need access to data, we need a computer, and we need a few graduate students. And so the cost, the startup cost, especially of our research, is very, very low. So that wouldn't necessarily be an issue at all. Rankings is a big thing. Do they have the right publications? And teaching is another big thing. We need to meet, if we need to meet teaching needs in certain areas, we need to focus on people from that kind of a research focus. So like if we need somebody in service operations management, we need to look at service operations management faculty. And then when we go to decide, kind of after the interviews have happened, the seminar, that's a big thing. But we pick the people who are going to come to give the seminars based mostly on, their publication record and what they would be able to teach.
Thank you.
Yeah. If I can add one thing, if you get lucky and you get an opportunity for a faculty position, you have to go for an interview. One thing that you should do is talk to your advisor. Do not even try to have a phone conversation with a faculty committee without having a serious conversation with your advisor, asking what to expect, what kind of questions to expect, what you should tell, what you shouldn't tell. If your advisor, and it happens, was such a brilliant person that basically didn't have, sometimes it happens that you have an advisor that is so brilliant that his search was a joke, in the sense that they knew that the guy was brilliant, they gave him the job right away. So he doesn't really have an experience of what it means. Go there, talking to a lot of people, impressing as many people as you can during a faculty interview. And you have a lot of opportunities to do like me, saying inappropriate things all the time. In a long time, the process for a faculty interview is designed to be very long, to put you under pressure. You're going to have lunch, breakfast, and dinner with a lot of people. You have plenty of opportunities to say
Sometimes
things.
with other applicants, actually. I've seen universities put multiple applicants in the same interview.
So it is a very complex process, and you cannot go, you cannot go without asking opinion to people that have been through that process. And I had friends, colleagues that came to me immediately after I got my job at Drexel, for instance, and they asked me quite a bit of questions. I think I helped them. Sometimes you say you reply to a certain question, perhaps your point of view is wrong, but at least you provide your point of view. But you have to be smart and understand how to filter out the information that they are giving you. Okay? But don't go for a faculty interview, even for a postdoc interview, without asking more experienced people what are the things that you should tell and what you should say. Don't be shy in that moment of your career. Okay?
If I could just add,
Yes,
very,
absolutely.
very quickly, I know my time is up already, but it would be useful for you to speak to students in other departments and in other colleges as well, just to see what kind of interview prep that they do. Not everybody goes through the same type of interview, obviously, but this could be very useful in terms of preparing your materials. Because everything is so centralized at the business school, we actually have, everything's branded. We have cover letters, we have research statements, etc., how they're supposed to look. We do all these workshops, and everybody kind of runs through them. We have like the portfolios that are supposed to be prepared for everything. And say in engineering and sciences, it doesn't anymore, you rely on your advisor. We actually have kind of like a central group of people that do that for us. So it might be useful for you to get another perspective on what your materials could look like to different kinds of people, what resources you may actually have available to you. So just kind of throwing that out there. Make friends from other colleges.
And some of the information that we give you, of course, regarding the number of publications, are really department dependent.
Yeah.
I have a colleague from computer science who tells me that the conference papers sometimes are more important than some journal publications. And getting a paper accepted to a conference sometimes is almost impossible because the level is so high. So it really depends on the department. Ultimately, it's the quality of your work that is going to count. If you do good work, good quality work, conference, book chapter, publication and so on, it will stand out. Okay, so the quality is very important. Anyway, I wanted to introduce, should I introduce actually,
See, I'm sitting down and texting, by the way, wait, all the faculty members in business are always texting. It's not something that's outside of our culture at all.
It's strictly ours then. I'd like to thank you first of all, Professor Benson. I'd like to invite Rajat from the GSA to
Alright.
this.
Yeah, exactly.
Just being nice about it.
Thank you.
this is time for a lunch break. Oh, I thought we were, all right. We have a big moment here. We have to decide between the helmet one and the mechanical engineering one. So it's a tough one.
Sure, questions will flow in more with more food coming into the
More
Shanta, I will give the responsibility to you. What is the decision to have? It depends. It's okay. It's okay for everybody. All right.
We want to be right?
So we want to have a lot of questions to ask a lot of questions to the department and the mechanical engineer. So let's have a little break for lunch and then we're going to